Welcome to Taking the Leap podcast, where we dive into stories of innovators and trailblazers who are shaping the future of their industries. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome a special guest, William Norvell, the co-founder and president of Forte, a company that's revolutionizing the way businesses support their most valuable asset, their people. Forte's mission under William's leadership is not just to provide counseling services, but to transform the very culture of corporate mental health. William brings with him a wealth of experience from the venture capital, private equity, and investment banking worlds. William has a degree in finance from the University of Alabama. I want to try not to hold that against him because I am a University of Tennessee alum, go Vols. And he also has an MBA from the very distinguished Stanford Graduate School of Business. He is a principal at Sovereigns Capital and is co-founder, podcast host, and contributor of The Faith-Driven Entrepreneur. In this conversation, we're going to explore William's journey from an investor to an entrepreneur and the challenges and triumphs of building a startup aimed at tackling workplace stress. We're about to unpack the story behind Forte and to learn from the incredible insights William has to offer on mental health, entrepreneurship, and creating change within the corporate landscape. I'm excited about this opportunity to learn from my good friend William, so let's jump right in. Well, William, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Where are you dialing in from?
Menlo Park, California right now. So yeah, great to be here. You've hit my limit for Tennessee fans today for the week.
Yeah, for those of you who are watching I on Zoom, I put a Zoom backdrop in. I'm very proud of my University of Tennessee heritage. And William, I was reminded, is a University of Alabama graduate. So we have quite the rivalry, both during the fall and, of course, we get basketball season right now. And William, you've gotten the best of me for the better part of a decade. We squeaked in one or two wins, but pretty much you've trounced us. I'm excited that Nick Saban's finally decided to retire, and so hopefully we'll have some better showings in the future. But
it's good. So my pastor's actually a Tennessee grad as well, and. This year for the game, we had a bet. And so long story short, I wore my Alabama sweater to church that weekend, and he still wore his Tennessee socks. But he couldn't show it as much as he wanted this year.
That's right. Well, you know what? We'll have to have a little bet on the basketball game coming up. I like my chances with our number 5 basketball team versus your basketball team. So we'll have to see how it goes.
I feel it. I don't even know where it is, but yeah, you should probably feel good. So I'm game for that. I love getting points. I never get points.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's dive in on some of the big victories that you've been having here recently. I am super excited to have this conversation regarding Forte. And I mean, obviously you and I have a little history, and we've been friends for quite some time. And but I am really interested to understand, your passion in this space and how you kind of came about with this idea. And as I'm kind of looking at the bio and when you launched this company, it actually kind of came out like maybe right in the midst or on the heels of COVID. And we were hearing all this news about the mental health crisis in America. It's how it's impacting our youth, how it was impacting employees who were geographically separated and working in remote environments. I remember hearing a classmate of mine giving a talk on this, and he said, guys, and this was to a group of CEOs and presidents from around the world. He said, think about how big this is. The Great Britain is just now starting a division, a minister of loneliness, specifically to talk about this epidemic of mental health issues and stress and the loneliness of the population. And so here you are, somewhere along the line, you see something, you see that there's a problem, and you decide to step in and say, you know what, we've got a solution for it. So walk me through this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And yeah, that's a lot of where we started. I'll tell my co-founder story as well, who's amazing, who you've met as well, Vineet, Rajan, because we kind of come at it from two different angles. So that's kind of the mashing up of the idea. But yeah, I mean, I've always loved people. I'm a finance guy by trade. Private equity, investment banking was what I done my whole career. So this is a big departure from kind of my normal life. But I think if you ask the people I worked with, while I love spreadsheets and getting numbers as well, I really loved helping people fulfill their potential. Mm-hmm. And my favorite parts of the day were actually when I got to work on a small team or mentor a young analyst or associate, and even some people above me, right? I mean, just, hey, what do you need? How can I help you get to where you want to be? Is actually what I really love to do. And so the essence of helping people fulfill their potential, a lot of it is mental, right? A lot of it starts up in the mind and what we can do, from Tony Robbins to other great people, right? The gap in the market we saw. So, like I said, coming at it from two different angles. Mine's a bit of a personal story, which I think you've heard a little bit. I battled many things in life, like a lot of people. One of them, lifelong family battle with alcohol. I fell victim to it just like everyone else. Ended up in jail 4 or 5 times at Alabama. So Alabama was good for me and bad for me at the same time. But had a severe problem. And I was able to beat that, which was really great over time, and my faith is a big part of that journey. I was able to find my personal savior, Jesus, when I was 27 years old, and that really changed the direction of that problem. However, we live in a broken world, is what that Bible tells me, and so sin nature has to go somewhere. So for me personally, it has manifested itself in about 6 or 8 times of the year. I just get really, really sad. I just find a dark hole. I can't get out of it. The main set of emotions I have are around, I feel like I've caused pain to everybody in my life. I feel like I can't get out of it. I feel like I just want to leave because everyone's going to be better without me, including my 3 children who are 5, 3, and 2. And in severe problems, I write letters in my head of, hey, I left for you, right? Now, I think you and many good people would be looking around going, well, that's not right. But I can't break out of that cycle unless someone asks me those questions. And so during that season of COVID, it got very acute, and I had to develop a system. And so I had 3 guys who were just there for me. Red alert text chain. I need somebody to remind me what is true, good, and beautiful about the world. I need someone to listen. I need someone to ask questions. And I started wondering, why does that not exist in the corporate landscape, right, for the most part? And I think if you're listening to the podcast, you may be thinking, well, we have this at the office, we have that at the office. I think you have some things. I don't think you have something, probably, and maybe you do, and that's amazing if you do. But on average, companies don't give someone an opportunity to have a completely neutral third party have a conversation with you about life, work, and everything in between. So I'm going to flip, and then I'll tell you the solution. Flip to Vineet. Vineet was a Marine for 11 years. He joined the Marine Corps the day after 9/11 and spent 11 years as a counter intel officer all over the world, and a lot of places he hasn't told me and probably wouldn't tell you. But he was everywhere. And he always says, though, there's one person that goes into battle that's not a Marine, and that's a Navy chaplain. And he said that person's wildly important for 2 reasons, mainly. One, yes, you need somebody to talk to. You have seen things that humans shouldn't see. Your men have seen things that humans shouldn't see. And he said he has warm coffee and cookies and an open forum. And so that's one. Level 2 is they're outside of your chain of command. And it's so acute, if you can think about it in the armed forces, that when one of Vineet's men told him something, he doesn't even have a choice whether he responds or not. And while it may not be as acute in the corporate landscape, it's not that far away. If you tell your boss something, if you tell HR something, these people work for the organization. While they may be caring and loving and the greatest humans in the world, if you tell them that you're thinking about leaving your job, or your children are suffering, or your wife's been in the hospital a lot lately, whatever that may be, they're human. I've worked with some of the greatest people in the world. It's like, you still kind of get these hints of like, hey, are you paying attention? I know your wife's kind of been sick lately. It's like, well, yes. Like, did you have anything other than that story I told you? Well, no, it just kind of feels that way. It's like, right. Okay, get it. You're human, right? So the combination of those 2 things, we said, hey, I think there's, in our market, there's 2 really good solutions that we think are great, but we think they were lacking. The majority of the world would be seeking, one, access to therapy, which is great. I have a therapist. She's amazing. She's changed my life. She's very expensive and she's available very little, not that often, right? And especially when you get into these networks, it's even dicier. Right. But furthermore, only about 5% of the population actually has a clinical diagnosis that needs, actual therapy. right? And then on the other side, you have executive coaching, which is prohibitively expensive for the top layer of management. Maybe that's serving 3% of people. So you got about 8% of people at an organization being served by the solutions we saw in the marketplace. So we said, who's serving the other 92, right? Who may just be not thriving in life, right? Maybe they're not severely depressed. Maybe they don't have this giant crisis moment, but they're just not thriving in life. And we think those people, nothing will, like AI is fantastic and it's going to do some really cool things for the world, I think. But it's never going to replace a human-human connection, right? It's never going to replace listening and hearing and asking good questions. And then also we wanted to provide an opportunity. Most people, and I am not a trained therapist, so someone feel free to lob in. William doesn't know what he's talking about, but I've done a little research. You graduate from therapy. You graduate from executive coaching, right? There are time boxes on there. And we don't think that's the way the human condition actually works, right? We think you need someone there for all seasons of life, for all times, with you for 5 years. And so that's more where our solution comes in too. We're there for all seasons. We're there for all times. Call us anytime. And then also because we built our own training academy, we trained our own people. We broke some of the molds as well, which is we're not built on hour sessions. You can call us for 15 minutes, for 30 minutes, for 45 minutes. We've done thousands and thousands of hours now, and our average call is 40 minutes long. Why? People are busy, especially a lot of our essential workers, teachers and nurses. A lot of people on our platform, they call on the drive home. They don't have time to schedule an appointment 2 weeks out. They don't know what their schedule is going to look like. They can schedule ours 24 hours out and then call on the drive home. So that's kind of what we do. So we're an HR benefit. We sell to HR typically. You get access to the whole company. We actually demand that. So everyone at the organization gets access to our service in a per employee per month model. And it's been a fun ride for 2.5 years. We've learned a lot. And
it's so fascinating. I mean, it's so for me, being able to have maybe watched your journey a little bit from afar. I remember you and I were at a conference in Colorado, and you and I were in the same small group. And one of the things that really impressed me about you, I mean, I was reading all the bios of the folks who are going to be in, this particular small group, and I immediately spotted you and saw everything that you'd been associated with. I mean, private equity, venture capital, principal at Sovereigns. I mean, it's just this like top-notch, Stanford Graduate School of Business, MBA, and just all these incredible accolades, just academic All-American at the University of Alabama. And then we get in this small group environment, and one of the things that impressed me about you was you opened up. We were kind of going around and sharing, and you became really open and transparent and authentic about your personal journey and some of the struggles that you had overcome. And you were sharing that in a way of be like, hey guys, this is my story, and I want to be able to help other people. And I was like, instantly, it's like, wow, I cannot believe how transparent you were, and then the care that you had to want to be able to help other people who might be in similar type shoes. And I think a lot of times people think like, it's easy to look at a person like you who has this incredible resume and be like, man, this guy's won the lottery in life and everything's perfect. And you're like, people like me are struggling with these types of things as well. And can you help maybe through this journey that you've gone through, can you explain maybe some of the misconceptions that people have with this type, with challenges that people might be facing and the needs? And because I do think that there's some issues in society where people have misconceptions about things. What have you learned?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great thing. Yeah, and that's one of the things I felt called to do. I feel like, I remember I was late to that first meeting, so I think I really jarred everyone. I was late to that first meeting too. I think for lack of things have happened in the world, right? So let's talk about the last 40 or 50 years. Communities have dissipated. Right? You used to know all of your neighbors. You used to be there for people. The role of institutions have dissipated. From Kiwanis clubs to churches to other things. It's not quite the foothold anymore. People aren't talking to people as much. I'm an example. I was in San Francisco for years and didn't know all of my neighbors, which is kind of mind-blowing to me. I mean, San Francisco, you live on top of people, right? And you still didn't get to know them. So, most studies would say people had 3 or 4 confidants in the 80s, right? And most studies would say today that's down to 1. Mm-hmm. And that's average, right? So that means if I have 4, there's 4 people with 0. And I'm not a social media expert, but when I spend time with the 20 somethings of the age too, I mean, it continues to go down. Who I can really trust with how I am doing. And we all have a story. We're all going through something. Everybody you meet as a human, everybody's going through something. It may be up or down. The intensity may be more or less. But everybody needs somebody to talk to. But I feel like, and I don't want to say negative things about some of the text-based resources that exist, because I know they really help people, and that's great. But I think they will forever be lacking. It's funny. I was watching this thing with Simon Sinek just yesterday, and he said they've done a bunch of research, and he said it takes 8 minutes for someone to feel safe in a conversation. And it also 8 minutes for someone to sort of feel that someone is there for you. And so he said he and one of his best friends have recently just started texting each other when things are going wrong. Do you have 8 minutes? Right? 8 minutes of a human being holding space can be life-changing. And I think it's kind of one of those things that it's sad to say out loud, but so many people have never experienced that. And once you do, you'll never look back. But so you've got all the stigmas with therapy and things, those are existing as well, but all the you have to be strong, all the resume things. And look, I think COVID knocked some of it out, which is great. I think it was a good step to say it's okay to talk about this, but I still don't think there's a lot of great solutions.
Yeah.
Right? And I just think people need to be with people more. And it's harder today than ever. I mean, and I'm guilty of it too. I mean, I'm distracted, and I catch myself with my 5, 3, and 2-year-old all the time being like, am I really checking Slack right now? Is this the most important thing? I do it for a living, and I mess it up every day.
Well, one of the things that I've found through COVID, and I felt very blessed. I've been a part of YPO for over a decade, and that's been kind of like a resource for me, like our forum. It's confidential, and it was extremely valuable through COVID to be able to go in once a month, have a meeting with my forum mates in a confidential setting, and be able to, just get stuff off of the top of my head or off of my heart, and just be like, here's what I'm struggling with, here's what I'm going through, and to have another person be able to, say, hey, have you thought about this? And I realized that is not a resource that everybody gets to have in life. And it's like, like you were saying a moment ago, that's kind of more executive coaching type of thing. And that is so valuable. And I love the fact that, Forte is, basically in a roundabout way, providing a similar type of resource where a person could kind of come in, have that private conversation. It's not going to get used against them. It's not going to be, going up or down the chain of command, but they can feel very confident that it's like, hey, I can just get stuff off of my chest. I can share what's on my mind, have someone, I need a third party to be able to kind of, analyze what I'm saying and, help me through these things. So tell me a little bit about like the mentors, the coaches, the guides that you guys are reaching out to. And I would imagine, I saw on your website, the confidentiality is so important. Maybe unpack a little bit about that and how you're building your company around that.
Totally. And to go back to what you said a second ago, I think people underestimate just how valuable it is saying things out loud, whether anybody responds or not. And psychological research would tell you, Kurt Thompson's a great writer that on the soul of shame and some of these things. Saying things out loud makes it, you embody things after you say it. Thinking things is one thing, saying them out loud is different. So ran across this old joke. It's kind of a joke, but it kind of inspired part of our company probably like 4 years ago. The guy said, they did research and said, if you put a lamppost outside the corporate building and you told everyone that walked out of that building when they were leaving that they had to talk to the lamppost for 10 minutes before they went home, there would be significant heart and mind change. Just having, it doesn't even have, and then we always say, and we're more than a lamppost. We're a real human that can ask you questions. But like, it's real. Just talking out loud, feeling comfortable, safety. Yes, confidentiality is the root of what we do. As I mentioned, Vineet's backstory, when you have an intel officer for a decade, he's pretty good at keeping sources alive and well. So it's paramount. The second we break that, it's over, right? Why would anybody trust us again? And it's paramount in an organization. It's the same thing. There's a difference between having someone you trust and having like a confidential resource, right? Those are two different things. I have lots of people I trust, and I also trust them to probably objectively violate my confidence if they see fit, if that makes sense. Like I have that level of trust in them, right? Of like, you know what? They probably told that person that, and I bet they had a good reason. But I need another place where it's like, it doesn't matter. That will never happen, right?
It's in a vault.
It's in a vault. And, I'm sure we all have friends in our heads where like my guess is if you have one, you don't have two who you truly say they are a vault, right? We joke, I have one in my mind. I'm thinking of him. And he's like the only person I know who I don't assume the info goes right to his wife. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But everyone else I tell, I assume when I talk to their wife the next time at a dinner party, they know everything I just talked about. But this one guy, I've tested it a few times. And like, but he really didn't tell her. And so it's just so important. So our guides. So what does it look like? So because of all this, we decided, one, from a business imperative, we wanted to create our own training program because, once again, not saying negative things about Modern Health or Lyra or BetterUp. I think they're great resources for the world. However, they're essentially collecting therapists and coaches that have been certified by someone else, right? Their moat as a company is we have all of these people, right? But if you're a certified therapist in Maryland, well, welcome to the platform, right? Yeah. Maryland is certified. If you're an ICF certified coach, welcome to the platform. We thought we wanted to build our own category, which, as you know, interviewing a bunch of startup founders is great and bad, right? So we think it's given us, we can't be copied at some level, as a lot of these others are kind of in a race to the bottom a little bit of, hey, who can get there fastest and who can build the network effects and who's going to win. So we sat down and, it starts with what is a human, right? And we train everyone, hey, we believe this is myself and our team who's built this, which is comprised of PhDs and certified public mental health and wellness people, as well as myself and Vineet, that every human's made up of a body, soul, and a spirit. And the body is what connects the material world, and the spirit is what connects the immaterial world, and the soul is what's between the two and connects them. And we believe everyone has that soul, and we believe they are looking for how to integrate the immaterial and the material world. And that happens in that soul. And so that is the base level for how we treat every human that we interact with. And then, a lot of so I'll tell you who our guides look like. They're people that have held one-to-one confidential space before. They love empathetic listening. They're listeners and question askers first and problem solvers seventh. We are not solving problems typically. And they come from a range of things. Everything. We have therapists who want to do this work because therapy can be kind of all consuming. And so they want a bit of a break from their day job and they come here. We have ICF certified coaches, the same thing. People that, hey, I love building plans with people to get that next promotion in 6 months, but I also love just being with people and helping them unlock what's really going on in their life. One of our best guides in the world is a CrossFit coach. And yeah, that may sound odd at first, but I'll explain it to you and I think you'll get it. What does she do in her life? Sits there with a client, listens to what's going on in their life, listens to what's going on with their body, what are their health habits, and then helps them build a plan. But she is a listener first, right? And she is brilliant at what she does. To social workers, to people that have worked with advocacy, I think domestic abuse victims and things like that, to tech workers who love people. We had a pilot with Google not too long ago, and one of the product manager from over there said, "I love this. I want to help. I want to be a guide too." So all over the map, and we bring them in. We have about a 20 module course, which is, once again, first couple of parts are actually like deconstructing what you're not to do, right? Because you've probably been doing something. Here's what we're not doing. Right? We are not diagnosing people with ADHD. We are not building a plan for their next promotion. We are here to really help them integrate their life and help them unlock their unique contribution to the world. That's what we try to do. And we think that's best by helping them wherever they are and however they show up.
I find it really interesting that you're in the heart of Silicon Valley, probably the most well-resourced companies in the world. I mean, we've heard all the stories of just all the benefits, right? And yet in the midst of all of it, you find this a spot where people are, where the people are not well resourced, where there's not a resource for people who are having this need. What do you think was the biggest gap or your aha moment as you're analyzing this? Because you said, I love the fact that you're building this moat, you're building your own proprietary system, the way you're bringing your guides in, training your guides, you've got your own resources and assessments and so forth. Was there one particular area where like, wow, this is a massive gap and this is what we're going to specifically step in and fill better than anybody else out there in the marketplace?
Yeah, we're getting there. So we're 2.5 years in, so we've learned a lot. I mean, the first thing I would say is actually privy to this podcast. Deloitte put out they put out this thing every year called Human Capital Trends, and it's just freaking amazing. It's 150 pages and third-party data and all that. But the number one chart they put out, I think, just tells the story. Mm-hmm. And it's called the knowing versus doing gap is what they talked about. Respondents know that human sustainability is important, but few are doing enough to make meaningful progress. So they did this giant study of companies, and they said 76% recognize the importance. 46% are doing something, but only 10% are doing great things. And then they said, here's the payoff. Those who bridge the gap are more likely to unlock human performance, 1.8 times, which is almost twice likely to achieve desired business outcomes, and 2.1 times more likely to achieve positive human outcomes. So the data is there and it's overwhelming, but still the impetus to move is big. And one of the things we believe that for is because I think I'm going to get some offended HR people that are listening to this podcast. I'm not trying to. I think there is a perception that this is what HR does.
Oh, so people kind of protecting their sandbox a little bit. It's like, oh, we already do this. This is our job.
I'm thinking about CEOs of big companies. That's who we sell to. They probably think that's what's happening in their people department, their HR department, whatever it is. And to some extent, it may be, but that's not their job. Right. Is to be there all times of the day just to talk to someone. First and foremost, most of those people are a protector of the organization. Yeah. Right? Which is and that's what they're trained to do. And that's great. That's what you need. Right. Yeah. But that is not their first job, just to be there. And, and I'll tell a story from someone, but I'll leave his name out, Fortune 500 CEO. And I was sitting down with him pitching this idea early on, and he loved it, which is great. He's like, I love it. And I was like, why? Like, tell me why. He said, two very acute reasons. One, he's like, William, if I hired you in my company, I assume you're a smart guy. He knows me a little bit, but not super well. He's like, I'm hiring you to manage a team of 10 people. You've got an employee under you, and she's got a teenage son struggling with an opioid addiction. Two things come to mind. One, so who's she going to bring that to? Probably her manager or HR, one of the two. Either one, completely unequipped to have that conversation. You don't know how, you're not trained to do it, and why would you know how? And two, he said, if I want to be brass tacks, it's not what I pay you for, to carry the burdens of your entire team and things they're running through. I need you producing outcomes. I need you to be a great person while you're doing it, but I don't need you ducking off for hours and hours on end, helping all the problems that are going on in the lives of the people that we have hired here. So I think there is this gap of, and then there's this big, we have not talked about the elephant in the room yet, which is the employee assistance program, which was started in the 80s, and something close to 95% of medium to large size companies have one. And this is if you've ever worked at a company, you get your benefits, you get your health insurance, and they say, by the way, here's a 1-800 number that you get 3 free counseling sessions if you ever need them. So that whole industry, once again, probably started with the best of intentions, and I'm sure they help a lot of people. I'm certain they do. But a couple things they're not. They're not proactive. You learn about it in November, and you probably never call them again. The 800 number takes you all around the world. You end up with these 3 free things that end. You typically can't talk to the same person sometimes, and therefore, what's the usage rate? 1% to 2%. And that's built into their business model that nobody's actually going to use it. It's like a Planet Fitness, right? Like CrossFit and Planet Fitness have 2 completely different business models. Charge a high price at CrossFit because we know you're going to show up, and you're probably going to cancel if you're not getting good service, but you'll pay for it. Planet Fitness, $10 a month. We kind of hope you forget about the membership, and we kind of hope you pay us for the next 7 years and forget about it, right? And I'm not trying to criticize Planet Fitness either, but that appears to be their business model from what I can tell.
Well, it's true business plans. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is what it is.
And hey, Planet Fitness isn't lying to anybody. I'm not blaming them. It's kind of clear that's the business model, right? Is because if everybody showed up that had a Planet Fitness,
there wouldn't be an exercise bike available.
And then there are some studies about them specifically, which are fascinating from a business standpoint. Like they don't have squat racks, they don't have bench press, they don't have the things that attract high users of gyms. And I would say somewhat similarly, EAPs are built where it's like it's not the most attractive option. And they also don't come after you, right? So we're a little bit of the opposite. And once again, we got a lot of problems too. I'm not trying to say we're great and they're terrible, but we send out content twice a week, constantly reminding you that we are here. We want to talk to you. And we've built that into our pricing model that like you have an unlimited subscription and we run a giant analysis on what we think usage should be. And we're comfortable. And if we'd much rather you use it a ton and we'll come renegotiate at the end of the year. Right. But our goal is to get you to use as much as possible to serve your people. And so that knowing doing gap is big. I think some of it is the CYA with the AP. Oh, I'm already addressing that. Right. Okay. Which is cool. Somewhat of I don't have, just life. I don't have time to deal with that. And then the third, if I had to, a friend of yours, I think in mine, Andy Crouch was talking with us one time and I think we unlocked something. To do real redemptive work, you have to sacrifice something. You have to. This cycle, you have to sacrifice something. And the sacrifice we think people need to make that they don't is to fully unlock the unique contribution of your employees and everyone there. You have to sacrifice some control over them. That is a hard bridge for a lot of people. And we're like, that's where it really happens, though. Let us help them. Then they will come back to you better. And we know that empirically now. We have, years of data, and 95% of our users say their well-being is improved. 96% say they're more present and focused at work. We increase retention by close to 15%. Like, it works. So we're really excited about what's happened.
So you're getting great feedback from not only the end user, but also the companies who are purchasing the service. They're seeing the to use a finance term, the ROI on the investment.
We think so. Yeah, I mean, most of our, of course, we lose some customers here and there, but most of them re-sign up. We've signed a bunch of 2-year contracts now. We were month to month for the first year, as you might imagine, because we had to scrap and claw for people. But yeah, people are signing 2-year contracts now, sticking around, and it's been really fun.
As you're working with businesses, who are generally the people that you're trying to speak with, or the decision makers who are signing the contracts and deals? Is it an owner, founder, CEO? Is it an HR manager? I guess it could be dependent on the size of the entity, but who's kind of the strike? What's the strike zone, if you will, for who you're looking to talk to?
So it depends a little bit, but mostly we end up in the people department. Whether the CEO really champions it, they're still going to bring in their head of people, which I think is wise. And because a lot of times they don't even know what they offer, right? At some level, the CEO can be a step removed from even knowing what the benefits package is because they probably have their own thing going on. But we end up in the people department, which is great. These people typically got into the career because they do care about people. And so yeah, it's anywhere from 100 to 2,000 employees is where we spend most of our time. We've got some larger clients and some smaller clients, but I'd say when you get to 100, the CEOs may make the decision. When you get into 500s and thousands, there's people that this is what they do.
What does an engagement look like? If I'm thinking of folks that are listening today and you're like, man, we need this for our company. I obviously, I've been out there on your website at getforte.com, but walk me through like the decision-making process. How long does that normally take? And, they can contact you on the website and go from there. What does it look like?
Totally. Yeah. If you want to go get Forte, obviously, hey, if you're interested, you can email me directly at william@getforte.com. I will promise I will get back to you. But if you want to go through the website and read a little bit about us, we got some great videos. We got some case studies. We've got more info on our guides and our training. Book a demo. And my head of sales is amazing. John Lentz will follow up with you. But typically people get to know us, hear a little bit more. People are really interested in the guides. So they want to hear a little bit more who they are and kind of see the results. And we can dive deeper into that and show you how it actually works, because our, for lack of a better word, our attack strategy when we come in is really paramount. How we integrate in the organization, how we launch, how we get people onto the system, because we really believe it's kind of one of those once you try it, you're not going to not love it. But getting you to try it, we need the support of the organization. In some, at some level, this isn't a one-to-one correlation, but at some level, if the senior management's actually bought in and excited about this, we see giant uptake. If the CEO, which happens, which is great, bought it more of a nice to have, and they really hope somebody uses it, but they're not really going to push it out, less success. Not shocking, right? So we really love to understand the organization, and that's what the first call would be: is what problem are you really trying to solve? And we want to make sure there's things we think we do well, and there's things we don't think we do well, right? And so we really want to understand the places we've seen it just thrive. That, hey, if you call, I'm going to have some really fun case studies for you. Essential workers and workforces, from educators to nurses to franchises to hourly employees. Those are the people that we see just are, because we built our own training program and we can hire our own people. Our pricing model works for that type of organization. And most people in that type of organization have not ever had access to a service like this. So it really warms our heart. That's both that's definitely Vineet's dad and his life background. And, we love serving everybody, of course, but we get extra joy sometimes out of some of those organizations.
I would imagine you mentioned this a second ago, where you're talking about maybe where an organization maybe struggled with the implementation process versus one that really did a great job. Maybe a struggling environment is somebody said, hey, we're going to do this, but we'll put a flyer in the break room and hey, it's there if you need it. And that's not your approach, right? So walk me through the approach of like, what would it look like for an organization? It's like, you know what? We're in a high stress environment. We've got staff and employees, key members of our team who've never had access to this. We want to make sure that we're providing the best value for our employees. We want to make sure everyone's utilizing this resource. If you could design the absolute A+ rollout for an organization, what would that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we'll make a few assumptions about a company, right? Let's assume, for fun, you have 5 locations, right? Okay. So we want to get to know you first. When do the people come in? When do they not come in? Where are the meeting areas? Do people gather in the break room, or do people not go in the break room? Where do people see things? So we want to do 2 things. Give us your database. Let us roll it out is number 1, right? Because we know how to target people. So give us the emails of your people. We will target them. We do a lot of email. Once again, I'm going to assume in this situation, this is a company where people do use email. Where people don't, we have a completely different strategy, as you might imagine. But give us the emails. Send out an email 2 days before we send out an email. Say, hey, there's going to be something coming. And the preference would be, here's a video from our CEO, Vineet, that's 3 minutes long that'll thank you for coming alongside us. We'll tell you a little bit about the program. We've done that a few times, and it's just rave success. And then lastly, where do your people gather? We do send physical launch boxes as well that may include free coffee. It may include QR codes or posters to put in your break rooms and all these things. And then one of our favorite things we actually do a promotion in usually 6 to 8 weeks after we launch, called Coffee and Connections, where we actually send out, hey, book a connection, get a free Starbucks card for $5. So go buy yourself a coffee and then come on your connection. Oh, and wow. That's something we uncovered years ago, and it just works incredibly well. So we front the cost for that. We pay for it. We truly try our best to put our money where our mouth is, which is like, hey, we really want people's lives changed. We're not trying to get you to pay us money and get 95% margins off of you and never tell you about it. And then what I probably haven't talked yet about, what does the company get? So we are 100% confidential, but they do get an analytics report quarterly, which anonymized will say, here's the top 5 topics that have been discussed. Here's the self-reported data on how their well-being doing and whether they're more present and focused at work. Here's some other things we've unearthed. So you get a data analytics package that's highly anonymized every quarter. So, we may not be able to tell sometimes what's going on in an organization because we're not there, but oftentimes we hear in our QBRs, oh, well, I know what happened. We laid off 10% of our staff that month. And so that would explain why everyone called about work-life balance. Or our educators, for instance, huge spike every May in family and children. Why? Because they are going back to their families for the summer, right? It's like, so you can see some fun trends are, accounting in April, we get a lot of calls, right? So you can see some of those spikes and kind of coordinate that data on your own. Hey, if everybody's calling about finances, we've had some CEOs say, hey, maybe this is time to bring in a financial planning seminar. So you can unearth data about your culture as well through our data.
So you're empowering the decision makers, CEOs, to be able to run and manage their business even better. Maybe showing them some of the areas where, hey, here's some choke points, here's some needs. Have you thought about this? So you can actually kind of improve the organization on two fronts, both from an operational standpoint and also at the individual level.
I mean, look, we love people. That's why we got into the business, but we are a for-profit organization, and so is we do serve some nonprofits, which are great too, but they care about building a sustainable business as well. If we can't show ROI, it's not going to work, right? The love and care for people can only go so far. People are spending real money with us, and they need to see a real return. So we try to show it.
So being at the heart of Silicon Valley, a lot of times, I think over the last number of years, we've seen where trends emanate from that location. What are you seeing in terms of remote work? I know we've heard in the news, a lot of the tech companies are trying to get people to come back. Are you able to put your finger on the pulse and kind of give us a little forecast of what you're personally seeing? And how is maybe this remote work or even a hybrid scenario, how is that maybe impacting a disconnect with people and a loss of relationship and social connections that maybe they had in the past? I'd love to get your insight on all that.
It's real. I mean, remote work's a big part of our business because people just, that's another place where you talk to the CEO or head of people and there's not a lot of convincing. They know they can't take care of everyone. They don't see everyone. Remote work I feel like it's one of those greatest and worst things that's ever happened. I mean, I'll speak for myself. We're a remote company. We've got 10 people and just tell my own story. I mean, I love the fact that I get to work with the people I get to work with. And those people would not be part of this company if we had based it here. They just wouldn't. Some of them have reasons they live in Dallas or reasons they live in Denver, and they would have taken a job at another company, right? So just incredible joy to work with some of the greatest people that I feel like I have way more leeway on who I get to work with and the talents and skill sets that they can bring to our organization. Sadness would be, hey, I'm in a co-working space by myself, and I really wish I got to see more humans. And I get, it's not going to shock our audience at this point. I don't think. I'm an extrovert, and I get really run down by not working with people. My coach tells me often, you need to schedule 3 lunches a week with someone. You can't just be there from 8:30 to whatever alone. It's just not going to work. And I think the nuance is harder, right? And this is where our company comes in. Catching on a Zoom call that someone's had a bad day or isn't fully present is really hard. It's definitely on the phone. And thirdly, not talking to somebody for 3 days, which happens all the time, right? Those things, the hellos in the morning for 5 minutes. I mean, I worked in an office environment my whole life before this. Although Sovereigns, my last PE firm was remote as well. So I've lived in remote work for probably 8 or 9 years. Just huge pros. And then from the people side, though, there are some real cons. Yeah. I mean, you just can't check in. I mean, I think the studies, I'm probably not going to wade into productivity and whether that's higher or lower. I think there's people more equipped to say that. I know my team, I think, produces at a high level. I feel like if you're starting a startup, we traveled a lot in the first 18 months. I think that cohesive at the beginning is really important. So Vineet and I specifically spent a lot of time trying to get together. But as the organization grows and people have roles, I think you can get a lot of work done. But the people side, how much can you catch on a Slack comment? And it's both how they're doing, but also for me as a leader, how I'm affecting people. I probably have too much of a sarcastic bent to my life that I probably need to work on. And when you try to do that over text and Slack, and you can get yourself in real trouble. And you don't know if you've hurt someone for days, weeks, if ever. Sometimes, right? And one of my other startup ideas, if I ever get there, would be building a sarcastic font because I feel like it's needed in the world. So a wink emoji might not do it for some people, but gosh. So I think I think what you see in the Bay Area, though, is a little bit different than what you're seeing in a company like ours. In the Bay Area, you have, I mean, if you think about the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, I mean, a lot of this is, you got to drive an hour and a half from San Francisco down to Google's campus. And so when they went remote, I mean, a lot of people are like still in the area. Right. I mean, like that's different than like ours, where like somebody lives in Dallas, So bringing people back that have an hour and a half commute, it's kind of a different conversation. It's like, I mean, I get why people are saying, hey, you kind of got to do it. But I mean, once again, I'm 40 years old now, and most of my friends have small kids. I mean, those hours you can't get them back. And so from a life perspective, I think it's a clear win. Once again, the data will show, and I assume these large organizations have data that productivity has dropped, or they wouldn't be doing it, my guess, which I can imagine. I mean, I'm a human. I'd probably work harder with someone sitting next to me. I mean, let's go back to working out. Why does CrossFit work? I promise you without a shadow of a doubt that I will lift more weight faster sitting next to you than I will by myself in my home gym. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how motivated I am. Seeing someone next to me motivates me. And like I said, I'm a collaborative person, so I'd say this has been the greatest joy, and also has a few small problems. My team's probably tired of me calling them. I'm probably the last human alive that like uses the phone liberally. I'm like, I just want to talk to you.
I want to hear your voice.
I had an idea. They're like, but like we have a schedule. I'm like, yeah, I know, but like I need to talk this out real quick.
That's right. I do the same thing. I find that as we do so much in Slack, and we've got a geographically separated team all over the country as well. And there'll be times where I feel like I'm being very clear, and I'm like, I know how to write a sentence, and I'll be like, I just don't think that they're getting the message. I'm like, so I'll pick up the phone, and so many times throughout the course of the week, I'm like calling somebody. I just want to make sure you understand exactly what I mean here, or am I understanding you correctly? I'm thinking this, that, the other. So it's funny how as good as Slack and these various messaging services are, but just have that human connection, hearing somebody's voice. That speed, it's almost impossible to replace it.
Especially if you get into difficult conversations, right? Yes. So a good friend of both of ours, Henry Kasner, used to always say, and I've carried this for a decade, like, hey, if some version of, hey, if you're going to text somebody and you can call them, call them.
Mm-hmm.
You were going to call them and you can get on a video call, get on a video call. If you were going to do a video call and you could see them in person, see them in person. And so I think about that a lot. And especially when it's a difficult conversation, like even the step from phone to video, like if it's something really serious, I need to see someone. I need to see their mannerisms. I need to see how they're acting. And, look, you can't see all of me, but this is better than a phone call.
Right.
See your facial expressions. I can see if I've hurt you. I can see if you're tracking. I mean, you're nodding your head right now. I know you're with me. You're following. Yep. You're not staring at another email.
That's right. You're doing over like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah, it's like, but when you're on the phone, you don't know what's going on. So look, I love phone. I actually think phone is a underused medium of communication. That's why I use it a lot. I think people typically go Slack. I think they leave out the phone a lot, and it's a lot of Slacks and a lot of video. And like, well, if it's not one of those, I don't do it. But I think hearing somebody's voice is huge too.
That's a great insight. Well, you mentioned about, you covered a lot of the pros and cons of the remote work environment. And I want to talk a little bit, pivot slightly, and talk about pros and cons of your background. And I would imagine that it was a pretty big leap to go from a background where you had been for quite a while. If I look at your bio, I mean, you're a venture capitalist, private equity investment banker, and then all of a sudden, now I know you've probably done CEO, president, founder roles with others, but you kind of step out of that space into running and operating a startup, which is very different. I'm curious, so what are some of the pros and cons that you see with that? And I would imagine that like you had a front row seat of seeing great founders and great managers and startups that did very well. And you probably got to see some situations where people had a great idea, but it just never really took off, and it died on the vine. So I would imagine that's like incredible knowledge that you're able to bring with you into this new venture. Can you help share maybe some of your key learnings and things that you got over the years?
Yeah, it's more just observations. I don't know if there's pros and cons. They're just different, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, how I ended up here, I typically joke that if you hang around Henry Kastner long enough, he'll make you start a company. So that's probably the major reason I did this. But I still see myself probably as an investor first. I love being across 10 companies at once. I love helping founders. That's one of my favorite things to do. I joke that Henry's there and Henry is there and he's such an encouragement. But I finally saw a problem that I felt like wasn't being solved in the way that I thought it should. And then the difference is, I mean, they're obvious, but they're not, right? I mean, giving advice to someone on what to do, which is basically what I did for 15 years, right? Was some version of advice and counsel and I think I'm pretty good at it. I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's different than having to go do it.
Were you sitting on a board during that time frame? Were you usually because you're investing either whether it's private equity or venture capital, you're putting money into a company, you probably take a board position or some type of advisor position. So that's the role that, okay.
Yeah. So essentially, yeah, whether it was an official board member or, just because we had a stake in the company and, I wasn't always, being on the board, I think is overrated as well. Depending on how much, I think you can have sometimes more influence in a company when you're not on the board as opposed to when you are on the board. But yes, I've sat in some of those chairs but yes, large investor into companies. And therefore we had a say on what they should do and how they should do it. And they trusted us with decisions, on what to do, and a lot of times didn't. So lots of fights with founders too, which is great. I think conflict is, as Patrick Lencioni always says, what does he say? He says, consensus is a 4-letter word. Conflict is good, right? Figuring out where things are, and somebody's got to make the call. But from sitting in an investor seat where, once again, you are not running the company, you are not hiring people, you are not firing people, you are not allocating resources. You are not doing the day-to-day. You are giving counsel on the day-to-day, which is just totally, I mean, let's use some of the high points, like telling someone they need to let go of a certain person, and it's obvious. And I think back to one situation where I was 100% right. I say we, me and another person, but I think I was probably driving. I was like, this is not the right person. We've put money in, it's been a year. I see why they were great for you from point A to point B, but they are just certainly not the person to go from point B to point C. And probably needs to happen sooner rather than later. I think, and I've made a ton of wrong decisions in my life, but in this case, the one I'm telling, I was 100% right. This was the right call. But I didn't have to go let that person go. I didn't have to sit in that room. I also didn't have a 10-year relationship with them. I didn't know what they had done for the company. I didn't know the sacrifices they had made. I didn't know that they took a bet on so-and-so before anybody else would work there. I didn't know that they were overqualified for the position they took at the time, even though they may be underqualified for the position they have right now. Those are nuances that cannot be replaced. I've had to execute those decisions now, right? The same types where I'm thinking of, a situation we had here where, just someone, I remember somebody, I'm still a small organization, so, but I think everybody knows the story. But somebody criticized someone on the team that's I was like, hey, you're not going to criticize that person. You don't know what they've done.
Yeah.
Full stop. I heard what you said. Don't ever say it again. You don't know. And I probably handled that poorly. I could have handled it better. But my emotion was I just didn't know if I'm not sure I knew I had that level of emotion for someone who had come into this organization and done so much and sacrificed so much. And then someone new came in. The criticism was probably appropriate, actually, right? Yeah. What they did was not the right solution. But it's I don't care who you are or where you came from. You've been here for 60 days. This person, untouchable. But I need now counselors in my life saying, I hear all that, and luckily in this situation, I didn't have to let this person go. It's not the same exact story, but it might be one day. It might be a year from now. It might be 2 years from now. And it's just completely different. And same thing. I mean, I'll tell you one of my favorite stories. It's one of the hardest days of my life. So, obviously different organization too. Most of my career has been in private equity, right? Okay. Where if you have a bad year, everybody doesn't get their bonus. Maybe you lose a person or two. Your company's not going under.
You're still paying the bills and everybody's okay.
Correct. And once again, maybe it's a really tough speech at the end of the year, but you're not firing the whole company and the whole company shuts down, right? That's the world I sit in now in venture capital, which, hey, we're fine for a little while, but then we're not fine. And the binary nature of this seat is just staggering. And once again, convincing people to work for you, convincing people to come to my hey, we're early. You're coming from a big company. I need you to take a 10% pay cut, but we got this great culture. You're going to love it here. You probably hate it there. Fine. Convincing people to come to you when you got 9 months capital left, 10 months, 12 months, 15 months, no clear way to make any more. You got to raise it, and capital markets are crashing. That's a different ball game.
You're chewing glass every day.
And so I'll tell you where it's become so pinpoint for me. I still run most of our back office. I pay payroll. I press that button every 2 weeks, and my co-founder and I've talked about this. Of course, he has roles that I don't feel as much, and vice versa. But I feel the money coming out of our bank account in just an acute way. And I do that calculation way more than a human should, right? Because there's responsibleness of like, you should kind of know what your burn rate is. Then there's like, I see it way too much.
Yeah.
And it just sits on top of me. And just another example of something like I never had an emotional attachment to running payroll, but I do now. And I will forever have empathy and grace for someone, whether it's a big company or a small company, who sits in that chair that says, hey, I know everybody else doesn't watch money come out of our bank account, but I do. And tracking, I'm trying to get invoices paid. Most of our customers are great, so it's not really a problem, but sometimes you want it, And so that's an example of it's just a different chair. And I think they're both difficult, and I think they're both hard. And it's, but yeah, I mean, and then, if I tell a good story, I never knew how much I'd love 0 to 1. I freaking love it. Building something from nothing is so much more fun than I ever thought it would be. I never thought I would find this much joy, working alongside an incredible co-founder, which I probably thought I would, but it's still different doing it. Same thing. It's like, wow, but like he is a unique person that has these incredible gifts and this incredible heart for people, and being able to see how he leads and when he leads is such a joy. He is the CEO of our company. We're co-founders. I'm president, whatever, but he is the leader of our organization, right? I lead with him, but he is the leader. If there is, back to like, there needs to be my opinion is there does need to be a decision point at some point, but
having 3 CEOs is not going to work, right?
It typically doesn't. I mean, I know people that do the and there's pros and cons to it. I know people that have done it really well. I don't think it would work for our personalities, though. I think it's great that there's once again, it's kind of like a marriage. I mean, how often does he need to pull that out? Rarely. We typically figure it out, but it is clear that it's his decision if there is one to be made.
Well, William, one of the things that I find fascinating is you're kind of talking about both of these roles that you've had, the one as an investor and then the one that you're recounting as a now co-founder, president of a new startup, and you're growing it. And you used the word emotional. And that was the word that was on the tip of my tongue the entire time. I was like, it feels like an investor in that private equity kind of venture capital role can be a little bit more analytical, and they're slightly removed from the day-to-day battle, the operational type stuff. And so it's just it's a black and white, it's a spreadsheet, it's this. Whereas when you're that CEO or that founder in that startup, you're so much more connected to the emotional, that it's so much more visceral. If you're firing somebody, usually you're the one having to walk in, and it's a lifelong friend, or it's just, the emotions of it are different. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, I mean, and just logic, right? You have a portfolio approach versus a all-in on one thing approach. You have a portfolio approach, your emotions are, I got 10 investments. Well, they don't jar you as much. I mean, this is all we got.
You're gonna have a couple successes, a couple failures. You're diffused across the thing. You're managing this thing. It's just like, man, I'm living this.
Yeah. What if you owned one stock and your entire portfolio was in one stock? Well, that's what it feels like. And actually, I'll tell you a great story from an investor of ours talking about a different company. So he's telling me the other day, he's got an amazing investor, part of CEF, you know him. But he said he was talking to a team that's gone through a couple of pivots, right? They were coming to him saying, hey, like, just want to make sure you're okay continuing to fund us. I know we've kind of like done this to you 3, 4, 5 times. And he was telling me, hey, to this person, hey, I don't think you understand. Like, I'm totally okay with this, right? This is the way startups are built. I know it's your first time. This is the way this goes. He said, but however, I think you need to sit with something. I'm just cutting you a check. I'm going to sleep just fine tonight. You need to decide whether you've got another 12 to 18 months putting your family through this and putting your employees through this. Like, that's the decision. I'm good. And I feel like that's a concrete example of like an investor versus, and he's been an operator before, but in this season of his life, he's not, right? He's like, no, this is your call. I'm fine cutting you a check for whatever the money is. Like, I don't have to do this all day, every day for the next 12 to 18 months to try to figure it out. Like, you've been doing it for 3 years. Do you have another 12 months in you? I feel like that story really gets to the crux of it. You know, when you're investing across a portfolio, you just don't feel that level of, you know, demand over any. I mean, you do. There's times when we started at Sovereign's Project. I mean, gosh, that first deal meant everything, right? Like getting that. But eventually you will have a portfolio, right? So you can empathize with times and moments, but, you know, yes, the first fundraise and the first deal and the first sell. I mean, there are things like that. But if you're in the business 20 years, eventually that dissipates.
As you think back on your career, I know sometimes it's difficult to truly appreciate all the knowledge and all the experiences that you have with you and that you're leveraging. You know, it's like that unconscious competence that you build, right? But if you can think for just a moment, as you are walking into this new venture at this particular spot in your career, are there a couple of things that you look at and be like, man, I am so glad I have this knowledge or this experience or this understanding has radically helped me be a better CEO, president, co-founder in this role? And words of advice that you could give to younger people who are like, hey, I'm a decade behind William, but I want to be following in his footsteps. What are the key learnings that William has seen that has radically impacted and helped his career?
That's tough. I mean, I'm going to say a couple things. The things that come to mind is when you spend a lot of time in one area, and if you're surrounded by people in that area, you oftentimes forget how much you know and how much you can help people. A concrete example from early in my career, I did investment banking at Wachovia for a couple of years. And I remember I was going into the private equity shop for the first time. And I was kind of asking my closest boss, I was like, hey, I don't want to be disingenuous on my resume. Like, where am I? Financial modeling and, you know, understanding financial statements, you know, low, medium, high. And he gave me this great piece of advice. He said, William, you are beyond an expert level. You just don't know it because the two people that sit next to you are also at that level. So when you go out into the world, you're going to realize the amount of knowledge you've taken in the last 2 years is gigantic once you take this into a different sphere. And so really sitting on and not taking for granted what you do know, I think is step one, right? Like you've got a huge number of experiences, like take stock of them. What do you actually know? And don't compare it to the other person that's been walking the exact same path for 15 years. I mean, unless you just happen to be going, like if you're trying to be the next, you know, the CEO of Deloitte and you've been in accounting for 20 years, well, maybe that's exactly what you need to do if you need to beat that person out. But I think a lot of people listening to this are probably thinking about taking it into different spheres. And so you probably know more than you think you do. I realized that in business school too. I never forget, like, not that I'm brilliant or anything. On occasion, there'd be a question from a professor and they'd be looking around and I'd be kind of like, I mean, I'm not going to say the obvious answer. Like, clearly that's not what he's looking for. And then 5 minutes later, I was like, wait, really? Like, I knew that, you know? And that didn't happen all the time, but every now and then it's like, oh, I actually just thought everyone knew that.
Yeah.
Well, no, turns out they had a whole different list of experience that didn't include what I did. And what they know about product management, I happen to know about investing. But don't put yourself down on that. Okay. And then the other thing, one of my favorite stories, if anybody ever follows me on LinkedIn, then they've already heard this one a few times, but is just to really figure out who you are and who you want to be. Because I think the world is full. I think it's probably getting more full, especially in entrepreneurship, of copycats, because there's so much information. There's so many you can learn everything about Steve Jobs and try to go run a company like Steve Jobs. You can learn everything about Elon Musk. You can learn everything about Henry Kastner if you want to, how he ran Bandwidth and David. And I feel like there's a decrease from what I've seen, even in entrepreneurship, and maybe I'm speaking about myself, so I'll put myself on this fire. This is where I struggle. Is I try to find someone else who solved it because I don't really believe in myself. I don't believe in the gifts and talents I have. And one of my favorite stories, there's this old proverb about this Rabbi Zusa. And on his deathbed, he kind of started to cry, and his disciples tried hard to say, no, you've done great. Like, why do you weep? I mean, you're almost as wise as Moses. You're as hospitable as Abraham. Surely heaven is going to judge you well. Why are you upset? And he said some version of it's true, but when I get to heaven, I don't think I'm going to worry so much if God asks me, why were you not more like Abraham, or why were you not more like Moses? I'm pretty sure he's going to ask, why were you not more like Zusa? And so for people that are going who are you and what are those? And there's great, find your 5 closest friends and ask them, find your mentors, do some, all these personality tests from Myers-Briggs to Enneagram to Working Genius, all of them have their own gifts. Really sit with what specific skills. And sometimes I had to go through this a couple of years ago. I basically realized that I had been I had some skills and gifts that people had been asking and using of me for 15 years that actually wasn't what I was most naturally gifted at. Big shit. I mean, even this whole entrepreneurship thing, I mean, the idea that I actually might be creative and stuff, you have so many hangups from your nature and how you grew up and maybe who your parents were. And my parents were great, but they still didn't know some things. And, I just had this idea of I don't play an instrument, therefore I'm not creative. I don't paint, therefore I'm not all the creative arts. I don't do any of them. And so I kind of took starting a company off the table for myself for the better part of 37 years. I was like, that's not me. That's not even my personality. And so there's a long rambling to say, spend some time with who you really are and who you really want to be, and don't limit that, or don't artificially limit it. We'll put it that way. If there's data, my pastor in the city, famously, he got fired from being a teller at a bank because he couldn't count change right. It's probably in the wrong industry. When there's empirical data, listen to it. But if there's not empirical data, if it's just you in there, in your own head, and you've seen someone else who's maybe better, and I used to do that all the time too. It's well, but I've seen them and I don't have that kind of, charisma. It's well, maybe they do, maybe they don't. My guess is if you get closer to them, you'll learn a little bit more, and maybe you're more like them than you think you are.
It's interesting that you highlight that it took your boss highlighting to you the competence and the skill sets that you had because you didn't see it yourself. And so often I think we're probably our worst judge. We can either be too harsh on ourselves. Here's what I've seen with people. People can either be too hard on themselves, or they give themselves way too much grace in a particular area. They overestimate their proficiencies and right. I think it's really, really hard for us to be intellectually honest and have the right perspective. And so often having a mentor, a coach, an advisor, somebody on the outside who can say, here's how I see you. Right? You're giving you a different perspective, and a great coach, a great mentor, a great advisor can actually call you up, right? Edify you. And these are the things that I see in you that you don't see in yourself. And you probably walked around a little bit differently, hearing that from your boss with a different level of motivation and enthusiasm and confidence as you were walking into these other assignments. Man, I didn't realize I was that good, right? And in some respects, this is a roundabout way coming back into the services that you provide with Forte, right? Because I would imagine sometimes people just need that outside perspective of someone speaking into their life, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of our taglines, we want to help you unlock your unique contribution to the world. And yes, because I feel like I didn't do it for so long, that's why I'm so passionate about doing it for other people. And it's both big and small, right? I'll tell you a small example, right? I used to pride myself on the fact that I take feedback well and I take constructive criticism well. There's a nuanced answer to that, and a boss finally, same thing, external validation, but I finally figured out I do like those things, but also I'm going to get wildly defensive the minute you tell me. What I really like is for you to give it to me, not make me respond, and let me come back in 24 hours. And that is such a difference. And so everyone I work with now, I'm like, hey, bring it on. I want it all, but either tell me and say, let's plan a call tomorrow, or write it down and tell me, let's talk tomorrow. And, I'm kind of famous in my friend group for like what I call the next day text, because I'll get all riled up in a conversation and somebody will tell me something like, no, that's not right. And hey, seriously, really appreciate you giving me the feedback. I promise I took it in, even though like I acted weird. I just I'm not good at it, And, but I really love it. I really do take it to heart, but I do need some time to dwell on it. Right. And searching for those unique sort of, I'll say where you're 10 degrees off. Some of this conversation, somebody might be listening. So yeah, I'm 180 degrees off. Unlikely. You're probably 10 to 15 degrees off. And sharpening those edges is what really needs to be done. Is, what skills do I actually have? So, I think it's leadership, but what does that really mean? Right? Does that mean leading a company? Does that mean leading a team? Does that mean leading one-on-one? Does that mean leading in a group? Does that mean rallying people to a vision? Or does it mean I'm the person who takes the vision, puts it into practical steps, and then takes the team from step 1 to step 10? All different ways to lead. Introverts lead, extroverts lead, process people lead, visionaries and pioneers lead. But really taking that next step into, what does that actually mean too? And looking for some concrete examples.
That's great advice. One final question for you before I hit my final question is, I'm curious how your faith journey, your faith life has impacted your career. You mentioned at the very beginning, and I know that you're a man of faith and that it's deeply impacted you, but I'm just curious if you can, share how your faith has impacted your career.
Oh, so much. I have a very unique faith-driven lens. So I worked for a Sharia-compliant private equity firm out of Bahrain for a while. So my first experience with faith-driven investing was actually through the Muslim lens, and I still take some really interesting lessons from a faith that I don't necessarily share. Just their dedication to certain things, the lines they would draw, even thinking of going, spending time in conferences, and how important prayer was to them, and seeing that actually in action, though, like 300 people there for a conference and there's a break from 10 to 11 for prayer. Like, okay, cool. I came to faith later after that. So probably about 27. So later convert. He said, I don't want to dwell on the negatives, but like, I tell you, I don't know how people do some of this stuff without a certainty that there is some greater plan, without a certainty that there is some greater joy than material wins, because it's just too friggin' hard.
It is hard.
I just, and one of my professors, who I don't know his faith background, but a famous venture capitalist, Andy Ratcliffe, used to always say, there's a lot easier ways to make money than entrepreneurship. Like, seriously, don't start a company because you think it's the way. He's like, go work at Bain, go work at investment bank. Like, if your goal is to make money, like, there's a much easier way. And so one roundabout way to say, like, I'm only here because I think Jesus rolled out a plan for me to be here. And I can't be certain of that. I used to think in my early 20s I could be certain of things like that. I more see God as a yellow light God these days. That's a talk I give every now and then. I feel like rarely in life do you get a red or a green. Often it's like hey, you can press the brakes or you can press the gas. It's up to you. And in this case, I was sitting in a great place, working with great people. But I found a co-founder. And then we kind of meshed together for an idea. And then we got our first investor that said, hey, if you go do this thing, I'll put in for 20% of what you need. And so that was my yellow light, right? It's like, I don't think God was going to be mad at me if I didn't do this, but also it was a clear opportunity to press the gas and go on this journey. And so it's enveloped everything. My co-founder is a man of faith as well. I mean, from the investors we have to the people we try to hire to how we try to make decisions. That's probably the biggest thing, is really trusting. Once again, I really trust that there is something that matters more than whether this company succeeds. I think I'm called to be faithful, not successful. And man, that's hard. And that's hard. We had this happen recently with a potential transaction, and there was nothing other than the three major decision holders on my team just felt this wasn't a good idea. And and it could have changed the landscape of our organization, but we just didn't feel like it was the right time. And I don't come with a prosperity gospel of, and then something else. No, we may fail in a year. I don't know. But I know we made the right decision. There's this great, I'm going to butcher it. There's this great Howard Marks quote, big investor, that I think illustrates a good faith journey. I don't know his faith background at all, but he says some version of most people want to judge decisions based on the outcomes, but that's actually just like not the way to do it. You have to judge the decision based on the inputs you had when the decision was made. And therefore, sometimes great decisions turn out with bad outcomes and poor decisions turn out with great outcomes.
Yes.
That doesn't mean you were right. And I feel like that's faith, right?
Yes.
And that's faith in a startup environment is that, like, try to do the best you can, know that God's with you, know that he will work all things for your good, even though that may not look like you think it will.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When I it's like, I hope that means we build a great giant company because we get to serve a lot of people and help a lot of people in the world. It may not. So, it gives my wife hope as well. And the other thing I'll just tell you, as you can tell, I'm rambling. It's complex how faith impacts my journey here. I used to think I could give this 5-point bullet point answer. It's like, no, it's really complex, and I learn new things every day.
It's one of the most complex things that we can talk about and discuss because there's so many nuances. So that's one of the reasons why I love asking the question to the various people, just to see what their experience is, what their perspective is, and how it's manifesting in their life. And
probably the biggest thing I could say is it does impact what I'm willing to sacrifice for this company, probably. And Vinita and I both looked each other in the eye, and I tell every person that joins this company, if they have a spouse or a significant other, if we build $1 billion company and you get divorced, we lost. If our company was the reason, right? And so that's something that comes from like my deeply held belief that there is more to this world than material success, and that comes from what Jesus told me, and it's about loving people and loving others. And we try to be excellent. We're trying to build those things, but there are certain things I am not willing to sacrifice, which all come for me from my faith. I'm sure it comes from different places for different people, which is great. I don't think I'd have that level of integrity if it wasn't for what I read in the Bible. And so we tell that to everybody, and we mean it, and we try to call each other out all the time when we feel like that's maybe out of balance. Because there's times to sacrifice for the business, and there's times not to. But once again, very clear line of you should know when you've done too much.
That's a great answer. I appreciate you being so authentic and sharing that. My final question, there's a question I have asked a number of different individuals over the last number of pods last year. I'm going to change it for you, though. So it could go down a different route. I had a key mentor and advisor for me share some advice. I shared with him that my wife and I had never done marriage counseling or marriage therapy, and my wife had been, Bobby, I think it's going to be great for us to do it. And I had this misconception about therapy and counseling. I'm like, Brandy, we're doing great. We've been married for 25 years. I mean, what's wrong? I mean, we're communicating well. We've got 6 kids. Everything's perfect. But she's like, no, I think it's going to be good for us. I wouldn't pull the trigger. I had this misconception that maybe my misconception was that there was something wrong with me or there was something wrong with us. And I was like, we don't need it, right? And I sat down with my advisor and he said, Bob, how much money do you spend each year on YPO and executive training and coaching for you to be a better CEO and executive of your company? And as you know, what YPO is, it's not cheap. It's pretty expensive.
Yeah, I figured it was. I don't know.
It gets real expensive. And he goes, and you're not willing to spend anything to do the same thing for your marriage? And it was just like, or right through the chest. And I'm like, all right. So my wife and I, we've now done it. We've found this fantastic individual that we use. It's literally, and now I'm the one. She's like, we don't need to do it anymore. We've done it for a couple of years. And I'm the one who's kind of like, when's our next session? Because I love it. I love it, right? We get to go in there and we've formed our own language and we communicate better. It's taken our marriage to a completely different level. And I try to share this story with as many people as I possibly can because I truly believe, I was one of them, had a misconception about therapy, counseling, all those types of things. So my question for you, somebody's listening today, maybe it's a CEO of a company or a decision maker in a company, and they're kind of on the fence, and they're like, like maybe I want to invest in this, maybe I don't know. Maybe it's somebody who's like, I've always wanted to have therapy. I need a coach, I need a mentor, I need somebody to talk to. Do I really want to do that? Man, I'm going to have to be authentic and transparent. I want to maybe share some things that I don't want to share. I don't know if I want to take it. It feels uncomfortable. You have that person in front of you. What would you say to encourage them to take that step?
Oh, if it's that person, I think you got to really dig to, do you really want to know who you are? Like, or especially that person, because they probably have a lot of people that want things from them, that tell them great things about themselves. I heard this concept years ago that I see some people have, but a lot of people don't, called the Fellowship of the Unimpressed. And, do you have that group of people around you that no matter what you do, no matter how much you succeed, they'll always tell you the truth because they knew you win, And that's what this type of resource can do, because they're paid to do it, right? Is be completely neutral, completely objective, and ask you the really hard questions. And, like anything, like recovery, the main plea is why not try? Give it 3 sessions.
What do you have to lose?
Yeah, like if you really say it's important, which most people do, yes. What is there to lose? It's not a Pascal's wager type thing with faith, because I'm not sure I believe in that, but some version of that of hey, like, why not try? It's working for so many other people. But I think that deeper question is, do you really want to know? And look, some people don't, and if they really don't want to know, I probably won't push them too hard. Honestly, it's like, hey, if that's not important to you, then yeah. Probably keep living the way you're living, but there's probably some things you're missing. And it is shocking how much a neutral third party can tell you. I talk about it even with my old Red Alert text chain. Last comment, just like, my friends are amazing. I guess the best in the world. So grateful for them every day. But there is still they know my family. I know their family. They know my hangups. I know theirs. We have to go on the ski trip together in 2 months. And well, are they really going to say the thing because they don't want it to be awkward tomorrow at dinner? Our kids know each other. Even the best, well-meaning, amazing human beings in your life are not the same as somebody who's completely objectionably neutral. It's not the same. I used to think it was. It's not.
It's not. I 100% agree. And to echo those comments, it's a game changer. It's been a game changer to have that type of resource and that type of person in my life. Has been a game changer in my business as a CEO, as a founder of a company, as a husband, as a father, as a friend. If you haven't experienced it, you can't quite put it into words, and you can't put a price tag on it. And so it's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate, William, about the service that you are providing, the company that you and your co-founder have started. This type of help has been so empowering in my life. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on here, hear your story, and be able to get this to our audience, for people to be motivated and inspired to take that next step in their own personal journey. We talk to individuals who are wanting to be the best version of themselves. If you can scale up and just improve by 1 or 2% over the course of a lifetime, that is huge. And so I appreciate you as a friend, as a leader, as a person of faith, and the way that you authentically and transparently live your life and tell your story in a way to motivate and inspire people. I think that this is what our country needs today more than ever. And I just want to say thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast with us today. I'm
grateful for having you. It's been fun. Been a fun 5, 6, 7-year journey alongside each other. So grateful for you as well. Where can people follow you if they want to learn more about your company? They also want to follow some of the things that you're writing on and discussing. Where are you at in the socials? Yeah, Get Forte is the big one for the website, but follow me on LinkedIn. That's where I spend most of my time. I don't have an appetite for Twitter yet. maybe one day. But I post pretty regularly on LinkedIn, some about the company, mostly about observations on life that I see. I find myself entertaining, so I'm trying to see if other people do too. I find you very entertaining. That's awesome. Well, we will definitely follow you on the socials. And until our next interview, I wish you the very best, my friend. Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. As we wrap up another fascinating and informative conversation, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to our guest.
William, your insights and the work that you're doing with Forte are truly inspirational, and I'm super grateful that you could join us today and share a little bit of your story. To learn more about Forte, go to his website at getforte.com. That's get, Forte.com. None of this would be possible without our incredible tech team. A big shout out to Mitch White, whose editing skills make us sound seamless and professional, and to Tristan White, my incredible daughter, who is instrumental in creative direction and marketing and helping us put our very best foot forward. To all of our listeners, I just want to say thank you for tuning in. If you've enjoyed our conversation today, please follow us on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Sharing this episode with your friends or leaving us a review helps us more than you know. And it's one of the very best ways that you can support us. Your feedback is invaluable and it helps us grow and bring more content like this to you. We'll be back next week with another fascinating guest. Until then, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep listening. Take care, everybody.